You're not going to do that. I'm going to give more seat. I'm going to.
You can sit over here.
I'm just thinking about standing with people for a little bit. I'm just going to be able to stand a little bit if we need more space to be able to hear better.
Yeah, let me check with the people online. There's seats right here, folks. There's seats right here. There are 3 seats.
Okay.
So good morning. You all know, I love to go to conferences where they introduce someone who's going to introduce the speaker. So I'm introducing Anna, who will introduce our speaker.
Dr. Craig. One of the real joys of my work here this year was having a new friend who felt like you just pour water and instant friend who just gets you. And that's Dr. Brian Flanagan, who is our endowed chair in Catholic theology and has come to us from the DC area, and has a very long resume, which I will not recite. But this is a man with a good heart who knows a lot and who is not afraid to sing "Moving Right Along with You" from the Muppets when you have to start a tedious task. So, thank you, Brian, for being with us today and sharing your wisdom.
Any friends of Anna's are friends of mine now because it's been a wonderful first year here at Loyola. Couple of quick things. Can everyone hear me? Can you hear me online? Those of you who are online? No, people online say they can't hear me.
You probably need to be closer to the.
Let me go over to. I'm going to go over to. It's going to be coming over on that one. So I'm going to move over there.
Make sure you're not muted.
Slide to the side of the screen. That way, I'm on the corner here now. Can you hear me over here now? Can you hear me a little bit better?
Unmute, perhaps.
No, it's
Yeah, that's better.
Yeah, it's much better.
Great. I'll stay over here then.
Thank
Now.
you. Okay, thanks.
Couple of other things I usually start off with. We are Christians. That means we value the body as a good thing. So take care of your body as you need to, as we're talking this morning. Go use the bathroom, get some more coffee if you're the kind of person whose body needs to move at some point.
There is no more coffee.
If you need something, if you need to leave early, if you need to get up and move around, don't hesitate. This is not class, right? So don't feel like you need to apologize or anything. Do whatever you need to do. Be as present as you're able, as you want to be. Second, I'm from Rhode Island. I am now home of the newest Real Housewives franchise. If you want to waste some brain cells, I have a tendency to talk too fast and to mumble. I work on that, but should that change? Should you not understand something I'm saying, or if I get into like a groove, hands raised. If I say something in general, this is not meant to be a lecture. Like, I'm going to talk a little bit for about a half an hour, and then we'll talk amongst each other. But if there's something before I'm at a stopping point, we're like, what the heck does that mean? What does that word mean? Interrupt me right away. Don't wait till the end there. It's really great to be here. It's great to be here in a Lutheran space. So my husband is Episcopalian. This is not recorded, right? Not because of that, not because of the gay stuff, because of when.
Sorry, you're still fading out quite a bit. I wonder if you could say really close to the mic. I'm having trouble hearing you.
I wonder if it's coming through. I bet it's coming through the sound instead of coming through the owl.
Is there any tech person that could figure this out for us? While that's being figured out, I'll tell you my one joke. People often ask, well, when you're going to become Episcopalian instead of being Catholic, and my stock joke is sort of, if I ever had to leave the Catholic Church, I'd probably become Lutheran. They're like Episcopalians who believe things. Still. So I start a very unecumenical note here. People online were finding somebody to get the tech better is my understanding. So we'll go from there. So people online are having trouble hearing me.
Oh,
So am I supposed to be close to that or close to that or?
it should be picking up from here, so it shouldn't have a problem, but let me just make sure.
Yeah, when you, because they couldn't hear him over there, and they could
Yeah.
sort of hear him here. I think that it's coming. The sound is coming from the left.
Can we move the
instead
owl
of coming
closer
from the
maybe?
owl.
Or maybe put me in the middle?
Yeah, if you want to sit here, if you would like to sit here, I'll make this the
I know you want to
microphone.
move around, Brian.
Okay, try from here, and they'll be able to hear you great if you are sitting
All right.
from here.
Let's try this. Can you hear me now?
Yep, it's kind of variable, but generally we can.
Yes, that's
Okay.
better. That's better.
All right, I'll stay here then. I'll do less moving around. I got pictures. I figure if you don't want to listen to me, you can look at pretty pictures of the Pope. What we're going to do is, if this turns on, three things. First, I'm going to tell you a little bit about who Pope Leo was. Some of this might be stuff that many of you already know from reading the New York Times or reading anything else, so I apologize if I'm telling you stuff that you don't need someone to come in to talk about. But also some basic stuff just to help understand who this guy is and what's going on. A little bit about why he was chosen, or why I think he was chosen this time in the Catholic Church. And then some of the stuff that's going on, some of the major themes, some of the things to expect. It's going to be a busy week in Pope for those of us who do this sort of stuff. So my background, my area of research is on ecclesiology, which is the theology of what is the church, what should the church be. My last big book was on the church and sin. How do we talk about it from within a Catholic theology of the church when the church and its leaders or communities as a whole fail? So that question of ecclesial failure and sinfulness, and we can talk more about that in Q&A if you want. Let me tell you a little bit more about Pope Leo, though. So it's Mother's Day. Happy Mother's Day to mothers. Here's a picture of him with his mother, Mildred Martinez. You all know this as much as anyone else. Born in Chicago, grew up just outside of Chicago. His parents were both in the school system in Chicago, and both school teachers. His mom was a teacher, a librarian at a Catholic school. His dad was a superintendent in the public school system. He's the third of three. Oh, there we go. Oh, that makes sense. Third of three boys. You can see him there in the bottom left. That was not his name in the photo at the time. But if you read, you might have seen when he was elected about a year ago, just after that, Skip Gates, who does the Finding Your Roots show on PBS, did a really good deep dive article in the New York Times about his heritage. A heritage of mixed race heritage, coming from Creole families in New Orleans, coming from French, coming from Germans. I don't think there's any Irish in him, which is, a missed opportunity. But he grows up kind of in especially of the time, born in 1955, grows up in post-war baby boomer Catholic school system. A time where not all, by far, but many Catholic kids are being put through the Catholic school system. His mom works for a school that's in part staffed by the Augustinian friars. So that's the connection that we'll talk about in a minute. When he decides that he wants to become a priest, he doesn't enter into the Chicago Archdiocese bloodstream. He chooses a different path, and a sort of a little more interesting path in some ways. He goes away, get some great photos of his youth, goes away to high school, to a residential high school in Michigan, a few hours away from here. Doesn't stay in the archdiocesan system. So seminary high schools were a thing. Unfortunately, in some places they still are a thing that many of us think are a bad idea, where to sort of get young men into the funnel as quickly as possible, they would go to a high school that was pre-seminary. So lots of all boys and boys who were thinking about priesthood as a possibility at that time. But he doesn't do the one here in Chicago. He goes off to this one out in Michigan. And I think that's an important thing to note from the get-go, is that he is somebody who when he turns 14 or 15, is going somewhere else, going somewhere different, going out of the comfort zone of the kind of suburban or semi-suburban urban Catholic bubble that is 1955, 1960 Chicago. So 1969, lots of stuff happening. You can tell he's rebelling by wearing his hair that long. He's thinking about the Augustinians, but they don't let you just enter when you're 15 years old. He goes and continues in formation with the Augustinians in an informal way, and then joins them in 1977. Now, one question you might be asking is, who are the Augustinians? Most Catholics had not heard of the Augustinians until Pope Leo was elected, unless they knew something about the Augustinians from their own personal experience. So the Augustinians are a community of friars, brothers, some of whom were ordained as priests. In our time, many of whom were ordained as priests. They're founded around the same time as the Franciscans and the Dominicans. So we're talking sort of high medieval period. 1200s is when they're founded. Their foundation, they were not founded by St. Augustine. St. Augustine lived in the 4th and 5th centuries. Augustinians don't come up until the 13th century. Do the math. Even though he's very holy, he didn't live that long. What's their deal? Well, they were a group in the 13th century, and I can nerd out too much here. In the 13th century, you have all this religious revival happening all through Europe, especially in Italy, especially in the Low Countries, and especially in France. And so some of these communities of little brothers, all of which are part of these movements to try to live the gospel in what they call a more apostolic way, with poverty, with closeness to the people, with an emphasis on preaching. Some of them get judged heretical and become the Waldensians, or some of them actually theologically probably are and become the Cathars. Many of them get kind of folded into the Catholic family. So St. Francis of Assisi forms this community of folks who are trying to live a more poor and apostolic life with people and preaching the gospel, and gets approval and it becomes more of an official community. The Augustinians are like this. They're a bunch of hermits. They're a bunch of guys living kind of in caves and rocks and rural areas in the mountains in Italy. And they say, okay, we need you all to be organized somehow. So they create a rule based on the 5th century ideas of St. Augustine and the kind of primitive rule that he had for his community of here's how we're going to live our life. But it's important to notice right away, these are folks who are combining from the get-go a desire to be on their own praying with God, a sort of a real contemplative moment, especially by comparison even to the Franciscans of the time, and yet are also trying to being brought into community and caring for each other. So these contemplatives in community would be a good way to describe their identity, their charism. They're much smaller. Who's heard of the Jesuits before? Of course you have. There's 13,000 of them in the world. Who's heard of the Franciscans before? There's around 12,000 of them in the world right now. Who heard of the Augustinians before Pope Leo? A couple of folks. There's about 2,400 of them on a good day in the world, and going down quickly, like every Catholic religious order that we know of. They're not growing. Scattered in 50 countries, much smaller. So a real but smaller influence on the world. That's the community that he's drawn to. And I think I gave a version of this talk to my Presbyterian friend's church back in D.C. last year. And the best comment I got, someone was asking, well, did he really want to become Pope someday? I'm like, every choice this person has made has been to not the swift career path. He didn't, as a son of Cook County, if he had become a priest in the Archdiocese of Chicago with his skills and talents, he'd be heading that way. Even as a provincial, as a superior, as a leader, he seemed to be one of these people who didn't try to keep getting ahead, but kept getting noticed for doing a good job. Person in the front row at that talk goes, well, or maybe he's just really good at hiding it. And I'm like, thank you, Calvinist. He enters the Augustinians. He gets ordained. They send him to Rome. There he is in the Augustinian habit with John Paul II back in the 80s. He goes to seminary here at the Catholic Theological Union in Chicago, which is a new experiment at the time. It's about 10 years old at the time. So Catholic Theological Union was this experiment in seminary education in the post-conciliar Roman Catholic period where arguably dwindling religious communities said, okay, it doesn't make sense for us to maintain our own separate Franciscan seminary, Passionist seminary, Vincentian seminary. Let's combine these into one place. They very quickly, instead of it just being men's religious communities, also involve women's religious communities. And then they very quickly also start training lay people. Now that's important because getting his degree in the early 80s from the Catholic Theological Union means that we heard the sermon today was great about hearing how we've all were taught first the faith in part by our mothers. But he's the first pope we know that was trained formally in theology by women. First pope we know was taught scripture by a woman. First pope who heard the gospel from somebody other than Mary Magdalene in this kind of seminary setting here. First pope we know of who went to classes in seminary with women. Both lay and religious women. There's a way in which Pope Francis was very good on many things, but he didn't quite get women in a number of ways. One of my hopes for Pope Leo is that he has been formed with women as his peers and his superiors more than any pope in history. Anna?
Are you going to say something about history?
I was going to say that Martin Luther was an Augustinian.
Yes.
So we need to.
We know a famous.
That's why some of you raised your hand, right? Yeah. Oopsie. Yeah.
Who then got married to a woman.
Yep.
Yeah, who had been a nun. Okay.
So after that, he's bright, he's smart, he's committed, he's doing good stuff. He gets ordained a priest, gets sent to Rome, which again, not every person training for seminary gets sent to do a doctorate in Rome. That means they were this guy's got potential. This stuff here goes and does his degree in canon law, church law, at the Angelicum. So one journalist shortly after he was elected was sort of like, don't expect him to paint outside the lines. He's a canon lawyer. He loves the lines. He spent his whole experience figuring out how to work the lines. But he writes a thesis, which has recently been republished, on the role of the superior and collective discernment in Augustinian life. So he's thinking about how to be a good leader, even at the level of his canon law degree. He's on a mission from God. Right?
That's not him, is it?
That is him. Yep. Yeah. His first gig out of grad school, his first real gig as spending all of his time as a priest and not as a student, is he gets sent to the mission of the Augustinians Trujillo in Peru. And that's where he spends the first 10 years of his ministry, 11 years of his ministry. He's sent there in part to be a canon lawyer for the diocese. This is a missionary territory. Again, you don't do this if you're trying to become the Pope.
Yeah.
You don't go off to some small place where no one's ever going to hear of you again. He goes here, he speaks Spanish fluently, he teaches in the canon law faculty, but he also is doing direct pastoral work. And we have this relationship within the Roman Catholic Church where, especially in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and even through today, lots of communities in the global north, especially in North America, established relationships with communities in the global south, we had extra priests then, sent clergy down to work with them, sent resources down there, sort of help to form or be formed by, or but at least work with the Catholic churches in particularly rural areas where he's talked about like it'd be 8 hours on a horse to get to the next assignment, or in a car. And there's some great stories about him. Apparently one of his things he did even when he was the bishop, his relaxation on Sunday afternoons was that he would fix broken cars and give them to the priests in his diocese once he had fixed them. So he's still from Chicago. There he is. You see him in the Augustinian habit. You recognize that if you saw the Ralph Fiennes or the Joseph Fiennes movie about Luther, right? His next gig, he gets sent back here for a couple of years to Chicago. And he's working as the superior for the Augustinians in this community here. And again, he gets noticed. He's doing good work. And I think this is the most important detail for understanding his perspective on global Christianity and why he was selected as Pope, is his service as the prior general of the Augustinians throughout the world. So only about 2,500 of them in 50 countries. His job was to review and be present and to be support for and to fix problems at every Augustinian parish, school, ministry throughout the world. And he spent those 12 years Notice that's 2 6-year terms. That means he did a good job. They took a chance on him, and they thought he was good to have for another 6 years. He spent those 12 years traveling around the world, mostly in airplanes, visiting places, giving spiritual advice, giving spiritual comfort, but also dealing with a lot of problems, dealing with problems of financial improprieties, dealing with problems of clerical sexual abuse and abuse of vulnerable adults, dealing with priests who are having their own issues in their community, doing this in a number of different languages. And that for him was where he, and sort of, I think, became the person that he became, was not just in his early ministry, but also with this responsibility for global leadership. Awareness of what the Augustinians in Latin America were facing, and what that was different from what the Augustinians in West Africa were facing, which was different from what the Augustinians in East Africa were facing, and sort of seeing the differences of that. And he got a reputation there for, he was a guy who actually read the reports. He would show up. There's one story that I heard at a panel a few weeks ago where something was going wrong. There was some financial impropriety and some other improprieties, and he shows up with his briefcase at this particular house, and he's like, "So what's going on?" "Oh, everything's fine, Padre Roberto. Everything's fine." And he puts the briefcase and pulls out the files and puts it on. Like, should we go through these one by one, or do you want to tell me what's going on here? It's kind of like when you get to that point, you don't get the easy problems anymore. Yeah. And he got a reputation, especially for listening carefully. The word on the street when he was first elected was two ears, one mouth, listening a lot more than speaking. He got a reputation for being very thorough. He got a reputation for reading not just the reports, but knowing how to look at a spreadsheet.
He had a math degree.
He had a math degree originally, yeah. He then gets appointed bishop by Pope Francis. So that's him on a horse when he's bishop of Chiclayo in Peru. And he does that for about 8 years. 8 years, is that math right? Yeah, that's right. 8 years where he is the bishop in a rural diocese. I love this photo because this shows the kind of bishop he was. Out in waders after flood, recording a video asking for support from North American Catholics for funds to help his recently devastated by floods diocese. That for me is the kind of person, a moment of seeing, okay, here's something we're getting to the real deep. He is not the kind of bishop who is sitting around in the chancery waiting for people to come wait on him. He was really out there and got into some arguments with people, but was really involved in the Latin American church. To the point that he didn't really know most of the U.S. Catholic cardinals. He was sort of he was not part of the, even though he's American by birth, he's not part of the American Roman Catholic Church scene with all, especially the scene before Pope Francis of a different kind of bishop. Francis likes him, despite the fact they had a fight when he was the head of Augustinians and Francis was the Bishop of Buenos Aires, where Francis wanted him to do something, wanted the Augustinians to staff somewhere, and Prevost said no. So when Francis was elected, he said, "Oh, don't worry, then I can breathe easy. He'll never make me a bishop." Well, sense of humor. He becomes the head of the Congregation for Clergy and the Congregation for Bishops, and very importantly, becomes the head of the Congregation for Bishops. What's that? That's the committee in Rome that reviews episcopal appointments for bishops in the entire world. So he had a standing meeting for a couple of hours every Saturday with Pope Francis to go through the files of who we're going to name Archbishop of Washington, who we're going to name Bishop of Newark, who we're going to name Bishop of everywhere else, not just in the United States, everywhere. He was the guy. It's how he got to know lots of people throughout the world. It's also how he and Francis became buddies. Francis makes him a cardinal, pretty close to when he's elected bishop, right? 2024, he's only elected in May of 2025. So there's a way in which this is a pretty quick rise to the papacy for this guy. This is him at the funeral of Pope Francis, or one of the prayer services just after Pope Francis' death. Questions so far about his biography before I move on to the next place?
Did I hear you say that he was reviewing episcopal appointments?
Yeah, appointments of bishops. So every Catholic bishop, not Episcopal Church, but bishops, to be a bishop in the Catholic Church goes through the Vatican at this point. That's not always been true. but goes to the Vatican, and on the advice of the nuncio, the ambassador to a particular country, on the advice of the other local bishops in the region, but it all comes through this congregation of cardinals in Rome, working with the Pope and advising on the Pope as who should be bishops of places. He was the head of that. Yes?
What would be his relationship with liberation theology?
Great question. Deeply formed by it, especially the practices of it. Probably he's coming into the Peruvian Catholic Church scene at the same time that John Paul II and Cardinal Ratzinger are raising some very strong theological critiques of liberation theology. So he's deeply formed by it, but I think he spent a lot more time doing it than talking about it. He spent a lot more time with small base communities, doing stuff at the ground level. I mean, this is another part of his formation. In addition to his formation at Catholic Theological Union, he's also working with lots of lay people who are leading small Christian communities spread throughout his diocese. Well, when he's the bishop of Chiclayo. Even before that, when he's working the Augustinian mission, because it has that grassroots element. So I'd say he'd be really formed by it, but didn't write lots of books about it. Just was going out and doing it. Interesting, when he was named bishop of his diocese, the previous bishop had been don't quote me on this for the recording. I believe the previous bishop had been a member of Opus Dei or another similar, very traditionalist Catholic group, and so he had to unpack that and keep dialogue going with clergy who were formed, many of whom were formed by a more traditionalist wing, and some who were formed not in that way. So he had a lot of mess to clean up when he was first named bishop. It wasn't stepping into an easy situation. Why they choose him? This is him on the opening night, or opening day, right? Why choose this person? This is a huge sign of confidence in the way that Pope Francis was leading the church. This was a mark of the cardinals saying, we want that to continue, we don't want to change that. And so his closeness to Pope Francis, but also the way that he was acting, speaking, thinking in ways that were similar to Pope Francis, especially on some of the themes we'll talk about in a little bit. That was one of the main reasons. This was a vote for continuity rather than and continued growth rather than reversal.
Do you know what percentage of the cardinals were appointed by Francis?
I should know that, but I do not off the top of my head.
It was fairly large.
Fairly large, I think around 85%.
It makes sense that they would have wanted to continue. Okay.
Except, and this is the thing, Francis chose his cardinals in large part based on their pastoral sense rather than their ideology. So both John Paul II and Benedict tended to choose their cardinals based on agreement with them. Francis chose a lot of guys who didn't necessarily agree with him theologically, but he thought were good pastors. So it was not a slam dunk of, obviously they were going to do the same thing that Francis was doing. It was interesting, and we can nerd out about this later on too. And I've got some reading for you if you want, some books that will talk about the election. But one of them is that in the lead up to the conclave, there are these consistories, meetings of all the cardinals, including the cardinals who are over the age of 80 and so are not going to vote. And in these speeches at the consistories, the over 80 guys were spending a lot of time talking about how awful Francis was and how we need to stop all these things. The decision came different when those who were under 80, mostly appointed by Pope Francis, entered into the Sistine Chapel. One thing that made him really important was that he knew lots of people and had proven that he knew the world church, that he knew what was going on and had experience of the different challenges that the Catholic Church faced in Africa, in Latin America, in North America, in Eastern Europe and in Western Europe, and in East Asia and in South Asia. He knew some of the different stories that were happening, the different experiences people were having, the different challenges in all these different places. And I think, again, that experience as the head, the prior general of the Augustinians was really formative to give him both that experience, but also to have people see that he had done that well. People talk about his ability to listen, over and over again that his first step when he came into a place, when he came into a difficult situation, was to stop and make people, he has that gift of making you feel like the only person in the room and the only person he ever wants to talk to. But he spends his time listening instead of talking at you, ironically, as I'm talking at you. But like there's this way in which that sort of attentiveness, this goes back to that contemplative Augustinian thing, attentiveness to the potential of the Holy Spirit speaking through the person who happens to be right in front of me, seems to be a hallmark of his style. Was he chosen because he was an American? Was he chosen because this was a signal against Donald Trump? No. I don't think they were thinking of that. I mean, I think it's a nice side benefit that in this moment, we'll talk about this, in this moment, American Catholics, especially those who support the president's policies, are hearing pushback in Chicago-inflected English. With Francis, they always say, oh, it was translated wrong, or he didn't understand the United States, or doesn't understand Catholicism here. It's a real side benefit, but I don't think he was chosen because he was an American. Maybe so. The word in the council was that he was the least American of the Americans, because he spent a third of his life in the United States, a third of his life in Latin America, a third of his life in Rome. And that's there's some slightly different.
Citizenship of Peru, right?
To become Bishop of Peru, he had to take Peruvian citizenship. It was notable that on the night of his election, his opening speech was entirely in Italian with a little bit of Spanish. He didn't switch to English at all. One of my curiosities that I don't know is when he sits down to write, as he's doing, there's a document coming out, does he write in Spanish or does he write in English? Yeah. I don't know anymore. I'm not sure. And the fact that we don't know that shows you that this is really a global person more than an American at this point. One small thing that I think the reputation of the Americans that may have had a positive or partially positive factor is the reputation he got as the head of the Augustinians. He reads the full report. He's not going to allow you to give extra money to your brother. There's a sense of like the sort of the honesty relative of the Americans compared to some other places. He knows how to run a spreadsheet. He's good with business. It's the stereotype of the Americans. But at this point might have been a small thing in his favor. It also doesn't hurt that the United States remains the richest part of the global Roman Catholic Church, and therefore more Americans might donate to a Vatican whose finances are cratering right now. COVID, most of the Vatican's day-to-day operating budget comes from the museum, and COVID ruined that. So there's a lot of, beyond the usual sort of Italianness of the corruption kind of thing that is still happening, they had a real cratering in their finances because of losing the museums for 2.5 years. What is he going to talk about in his papacy? One of the really wonderful things, you know, that moment that you get a little pat at yourself on the back, was that the first version of this was something that I gave shortly after he was elected, and I was right. Because this was still the first slide in that original presentation, is that what's going to be one of the major things of his papacy is a focus on peace. So, and I'm happy also to share this the PowerPoint with people if you want to look back at these quotes later on. I guess I'll send it to Pastor Craig. He starts on the night of his election, "Peace be with you." And this phrase that's popping up again and again and again is a peace that is unarmed and disarming. He has been the most constant, more than Francis, one might even say. This has been a constant, even before the attack on Iran, even this sort of constant drumbeat of we're looking for a world of talking against war. And these are two of the quotes from a prayer service a few weeks ago, a month ago now, against the war in Iran. To them we cry out, stop, it is time for peace. Sit at the table of dialogue and mediation, not at the table where rearmament is planned and deadly actions are decided. We're going to keep seeing that. We've seen this on the plane, we've seen this in speeches, we've seen this in the pushback to President Trump. I bought this for myself at Ray Gun the other day to bring home for the summer. Second big theme is attention to poverty. And we've gotten one big document from Pope Leo so far, a letter called De Lexite that came out in October to all Christians, so that includes you, right? He's wider than the Catholic Church, as he was addressing you, on love for the poor. And that was in the works before he was elected. So popes just don't sit down in a room by themselves and write. It's a policy statement. And so usually there's a committee of people, of theologians, of experts, of scholars, of people who know the Pope's voice who are helping with this. It gets more personal at times, and the Pope always has the final say. And my sense with Leo is he's enough of a kind of attention to detail guy that he probably wrote lots of what he's writing himself. But this has some of what Francis was saying, but there's some interestingly Pope Leo sort of moments in there. One is this kind of clear call about not seeing care for the poor as an extra. That we need to, I love this line as someone who studies the church. When the church bends down to care for the poor, she assumes her highest posture. There's also some wonderful Midwestern passive aggressiveness in this. I often wonder, even though the teaching of sacred scripture is so clear about the poor, why many people continue to think they can safely disregard the poor. There's a wonderful little edge to that. And this idea of when the world sees threats, the church sees children. So that continuing focus that was strong in Pope Francis on thinking about migrants, thinking about people who are marginalized economically, thinking about poverty more generally. Notably, he is going to the first trip that he chose for himself was his trip in West Africa a few weeks ago. The trip to Istanbul and to Nicaea was already on the books before he was elected Pope. Notably, on the 4th of July, he will not be in Washington, D.C. He will be at Lampedusa, the island off Sicily that is the entry point and the point of death for thousands of migrants trying to get into Europe from North Africa. Yeah, Ben.
I know he went to Lebanon. Was that scheduled before his papacy?
Yeah, the trip to Lebanon, Istanbul, Lebanon, all of that was part of the commemorations of the 17th anniversary of the Council of Nicaea. All of that was on the table for Pope Francis, and then so part of him getting elected was confirming we're still going to go see the Patriarch. We're still going to do this trip. Yeah.
I want to just check with folks, and you, Brian, we're at 11:25.
Yep.
Are we all good? Are we? If you need to leave, you may, but we might go a little bit over and just. There's so much great.
I got like three more points, and then we'll stop for conversation.
This is really great. Yeah.
Third big theme is going to be on technology and work. So why did he take the name Leo? Because of the guy on the right there, Leo the 13th, who was the last Pope Leo that we've had in the Catholic Church. Pope Leo the 13th did a lot of fascinating things, including putting an emphasis on Thomas Aquinas that we're still digging out of in some ways. But one of the things that Leo the 13th did was he wrote an encyclical called Rerum Novarum on new things in 1891, which becomes the first major document of modern Catholic social teaching. What are the new things Pope Leo the 13th was talking about? Labor unions, workers' rights, capitalism, communism, socialism, and all of the conflicts that were happening as a result of the Industrial Revolution. So maybe it could have been a little earlier than 1891, but it's this moment where Leo is trying to say, how do we deal with the new economic realities of the modern world? It's where the Catholic Church first embraces the idea that workers should be able to unionize. It's where the Catholic Church first says that Catholics can legitimately belong to and join non-Catholic unions. It talks about trying to find a middle road between godless socialism but also unfettered capitalism. And it provides the foundation for the next few centuries of Catholic social thought teaching on workers, on labor, and on technology. Leo chose the name in part because he wants to connect with that legacy. He's been doing a lot about artificial intelligence. And what are the roles of workers going to be in a world affected by artificial intelligence? What are the roles of humans going to be when many of us lose the dignity of being able to work because of the jobs eliminated by artificial intelligence? And so this is, when I said it's going to be a big week in Pope, we're going to get an encyclical on Friday. This will be the first major encyclical of Pope Francis that will be all Pope Leo's. Magnifica Humanitas, Magnificent Humanity. And we're expecting it to talk about artificial intelligence, labor, the dignity of being a human person in the face of AI, but also in the face of dehumanizing tendencies in the world, We're going to be talking about war, a lot of the stuff that he's been talking about, the dignity of people. And importantly, it's coming out on May 15th. That's the anniversary of Rerum Novarum. It's the same day that Rerum Novarum was released in 1891. So watch this space on Friday morning. It'll come out at noon Rhone time, 6 in the morning, 5 in the morning here. So. And then the last big theme that we're going to see, and this is where we start talking about, second to last big theme is we're talking about internal Catholic politics. Where does he move in relationship to what Pope Leo was doing? He is going to be moving the same direction, but more carefully, more cautiously, in some ways more slowly, for good or for ill. His motto is from writings of St. Augustine, in illo uno unum, just rolls off the tongue. The illo is capitalized because it refers to Christ. In that one, we are one. In Christ we are one would be a looser translation of this. He was focusing on, and I think rightly, his main job as Pope is to keep the unity of the Catholic Church. So keeping the people, this came up in relationship to LGBTQ issues last week, keeping the folks in Germany, in Belgium, and some parts of the United States who are more actively welcoming LGBTQ plus folks to keep talking to some of the Africans and some of the Americans and some of the Europeans, Eastern Europeans especially, who don't want any conversation on LGBTQ plus issues. Keeping us in the same room is what I think he sees as his main job is. How's he going to do that? He's going to be continuing these processes of synodality, which is something that Pope Francis started, of wide-scale, transparent communication at all levels of the church. Something you all have been doing for a lot longer than we have. We're trying. We're at least, we're not running the marathon, but we're at least off the couch now. No sudden moves. You notice it's a year in, and everything he says, much more than Francis. Francis was, the way one journalist described it, is like Francis saw his job as coming in and shaking the box. And Leo is opening the box and putting things into new places. So he's being very thoughtful. He's very young. I should probably know his age, but I don't know off the top of my head. 70. He's very young. He's going to have a long papacy. He's not for popes. Yeah. That means we have at least 10 years, I think. And so he's playing a long game of thinking, how do I make choices, especially in the appointment of bishops, especially in what I expect to be a revision of the Code of Canon Law in response to synodality that codifies things like consulting with everybody when you make a decision, codifies things. Right now we have lay pastoral councils in our parishes, but they're optional. I think that's going to change. Right now they can be chosen by the pastor who can just choose a couple of his buddies to be the pastoral council. I think that's going to change. That'll be later this summer. So he's doing things slowly and carefully. He's choosing people who are pastors, kind of like Francis. He's not going to choose culture warriors left or right. The recent appointment of the Archbishop of New York is a good example of somebody who's trying to play right down the middle and keep everybody talking. With frustration with those of us who might want more change more quickly, but perhaps that might be a comfort to some of my fellow Catholics who are really afraid of the directions that the Catholic Church has been moving in. He's going to be continuing to talk about the role of women and continuing to talk about the role of LGBTQ plus people. I don't see huge changes happening in those areas, precisely because of that first focus on unity. I think he will talk about them differently with more fluency and more active results than Pope Francis, especially when it comes to women's leadership. I think he's going to use everything that he knows as a canon lawyer to preserve and allow women to have more leadership roles in the Catholic Church without touching our third rail of women's ordination right now. So for good or for ill, speaking to you from a church that does not yet ordain women, that's where he is going to be going, I expect, for his papacy. Same thing, I say this as a gay man, I expect him to consolidate all of the gains that Pope Francis did, and in some ways what he's doing is providing a permission structure so that the bishops of Germany, the bishops of Belgium, some bishops in the United States can do more active welcoming of LGBTQ plus folks, but I also don't see any major changes or further steps forward on the status of LGBTQ people in the Catholic Church. So our last big thing was the fiducia supplicans, allowing for the blessing of folks in same-gender couples.
He's not rolling that back. He said so on the plane the other day. But I don't see him going further. And the last thing is, with relevance to our conversation today, is where is he going to be in relationship to dialogue? He is going to keep dialogue going, especially in the way that we as Christians together can speak to the things that he thinks are most pressing in our world. On the plane, someone asked him a question about the Germans' blessing of same-gender couples, and he said, that's important, but the church's morality should not be reduced to sexual ethics when there are so many other pressing needs around peace in our world. Some of the right-wing Catholics were freaking out because the newest Archbishop of Canterbury was in Rome, and not only did they pray together, one of the cardinals accepted a blessing from her as though she were ordained, was what right-wing Catholic Twitter had about it. Pope Leo welcomed her, prayed with her, they exchanged gifts, all of that. So I'll stop there. I'll leave this up, and again, I'll have to send it. If you want to read more, these are some of the best books that are out right now. Feel free to take a photo if you want for later on, or if I send you the PowerPoint. Or just read what he has to say. Again, the newest encyclical will come out on Friday, and you'll be able to read it yourself. And I expect, like all of the documents of recent Catholic social teaching, it'll be addressed not only to Catholics or not even to Christians, but the usual phrasing since John the 23rd has been to all people of goodwill. So I think he's hoping with this to sponsor a more global conversation on labor, technology, AI, the dignity of the human person, and work.
Thank you, Brian.
And then someone gave him a White Sox bat on a PayPal trip, and so you couldn't have it. Had someone here wasn't caring for a stranger.
Maybe stop sharing your screen in case folks online.
Yeah, I was going to do
we can see them better.
Exactly. And thank you for staying. I know it's longer.
No, it's been great.
What questions? What can I ask? Can I answer? What would you like to know, Anna?
I just want to know. So, do you think that Leo? How do you feel about how Leo responded to the accusations and critiques from both J.D. Vance and President Trump? Like, do you think he knew that was going to happen at some point? Do you think he was surprised, or what do you take from how he did respond?
Yeah, I think he knew what was going to happen at some point and is trying to really position himself as speaking as the Pope rather than speaking as an American in that situation. The popes almost never give news conferences historically. So the only time where a pope would take questions from reporters would be at would be on the plate back from a trip abroad, which again, that doesn't start until the 1960s anyway. Leo has been taking a day off once a week, which is unheard of as well. So, he's been going up to Castel Gandolfo, to the papal residence outside of Rome, and he's been doing a media scrum before he heads back to Rome on Tuesday nights. None of those answers has been spontaneous. The language is very like, oh, well, yes, maybe I think about, but all of that I think has been very carefully for him to say, I'm not going to not respond to President Trump, but I'm going to say something here. The letter that was written to J.D. Vance, the statement that refers to J.D. Vance's comments before Pope Francis died was likely written by Pope Leo, not by Pope Francis. I'm talking about the order of love and correcting him on his misreading of Augustine.
And isn't it true that the U.S. bishops came back and defended Leo against J.D. Vance when he said he should be careful about speaking about theology or something like that?
And he did. No, and that's again, that's really interesting for me, doing as someone who studies the church, is what Leo is doing is trying to return to a way of that we started in the 60s and 70s under Paul VI, and that really kind of withered under John Paul II, which is to give more authority to the bishops of local places to lead the church and speak for it in those local places. But he's also putting that responsibility so he wants to be not the person who weighs in every time that Trump says something, but he wants his bishops to be weighing in more than they currently are. The fact that McElroy and Tobin and Supich were on 60 Minutes that was not spontaneous either. That is the influence of Pope Leo saying, I can't be in the position as Pope of getting into a tit for tat with the President of the United States. You all should be saying this. And this is somebody who was bishop under a totalitarian regime in Peru, and he understands more than some past popes do, perhaps since John Paul II, about what it's like to be in conflict with the government in which you are residents.
With that in mind, talking about dealing with different administrations, I forget the Pope that was Pope during the World War II era, but how there were situations with Hitler.
Yep, Pius XI and then Pius XII. Yeah.
General question, but things were not good then, and the little I know about it, they thought he cooperated too much. Maybe that's not fair to say.
Yeah, and it's. So this is not my expertise. So I put put a whole shaker of salt out here. It's a complicated story. It's complicated by a few things. The actual raging anti-Semitism of the Catholic Church at that time.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Including among the leadership. An attempt to preserve the freedoms of Catholics in Germany by not speaking so aggressively that Hitler would then nationalize or start arresting more Catholics in Germany. The attempt to preserve life in the places where they were able to. The story of Pius XII is difficult. At one level, the first 20 years after his papacy, the work that he did especially for the Jewish community of Rome, was deeply valued. All the stuff that was happening below, outside the scenes, the number of Jews who were rescued in hidden convents, hidden in the Vatican itself. The Roman Jewish community lost a fewer percentage of its Jewish population than a lot of other places. On the other hand, there was not a wide-scale call for everyone to resist with everything they have everywhere through Europe. So that history of moderation, negotiation, and compromise is a warning to the rest of us. And it's one of the reasons I think that the Catholic Church was able to change so strongly and directly against its history of anti-Semitism and anti-Judaism in the post-Vatican, at Vatican II and beyond that. There's a way in which that should be a warning of exactly the kind of moderation. One wonders, when it comes to questions of women's empowerment and when it comes to questions of LGBTQ justice, are we repeating some of the same mistakes, or is it a slightly different situation?
Thank you.
Yeah.
Questions online?
Yeah, feel free if you're online to unmute or put something in the chat, and I'll monitor that as well.
Oh, the speaker is not on.
Oh, if you put something in the chat, I can read it out loud for you as well. Well, they might be doing that. Other thoughts or reactions as well.
I was going to say, as somebody who grew up Catholic, one of my favorite things he said, he said a lot of cool stuff, but my favorite thing is you guys talk about sex too much. Because that's how I grew up, is like the only sins we ever talked about in high school were sexual things. So.
Yeah. And to put that into its proper complexity, he's not going to say that's going to be important. He's also not going to. So in addition to teaching at Loyola, I work for an organization called New Ways Ministry that does advocacy for LGBTQ plus folks in the Catholic Church. I don't see him doing like a big change on sexual ethics. I do see him trying to de-emphasize, saying that the way he phrased it on the plane was that there are other issues that are just as or situationally more important right now. But I think he sees keeping the unity of the church as the mechanism for allowing the Catholic Church to speak for one voice on war, peace, poverty, economic injustice as worth the cost. So this raises some really thorny questions about who pays the price for unity, is the way a colleague of mine phrased. Who pays? It's a prudential judgment that, thank God, I'm not the one having to make it. Is preserving the unity of the church in order to be as strong of a voice against war in the world worth the continuing marginalization of women and LGBTQ plus folks in the church?
That was a question that the ELCA dealt with for 20 years before 2009.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we made, I think, the right decision, but it was against total unity to do that.
And I think that the example of both the Anglican community and the Lutheran World Federation struggles around how do we think about the roles of women and the roles of queer people is the movie that they're watching. And they're also doing this in conversation with the Orthodox world and with Islam. I mean, one of the things that comes up, I think, as well in the African context is African clergy and bishops saying, if we allow this, then we're going to lose all of our people to Islam. If there's any suggestion of allowing homosexuality, as they say, or same-gender relationships, then we're losing people. So what I think Leo is doing is continuing some of the practice of Pope Francis and saying, like, Fiducia Supplicans, this document on blessing of people in same-gender relationships. The Conference of Bishops of Africa said, we're just not going to implement that here. So Leo's not going to say, no, you have to implement it. He's going to let them do their thing. The Germans are implementing something that's probably just a little bit over the line of what was envisioned in the document of allowing for prepared formal blessing ceremonies. And Leo said on the plane that we've spoken to them about this. Now that's something different than we stopped this. We've spoken about this and expressed our disagreement. Is a different response to diversity and we've told them they can't put the kibosh on this. Yeah, Ben.
What's his thoughts concerning Palestine? Would you say it's relatively continuous with Pope Francis?
Yeah, I would say that he is, as the Catholic Church always, this gets back to the question of the Shoah, right? Of balancing awareness of the deep history of Catholic anti-Judaism and the sometimes complicity or sometimes sins of omission in relationship to the Nazis, and therefore a kind of attitude to the modern state of Israel of the baby may have been illegitimate, but it's born. And how do we make sure we maintain relations and do what we can, especially to protect the Catholic community within the borders of Israel proper? I think that, like Francis, he is deeply concerned about the suffering of the Palestinian people, deeply concerned especially about the massacre, the genocide in Gaza. They will never use the word genocide. They will always use they'll be very cautious to not get ahead of anything that the United Nations says about world affairs. His guy on the ground there is a guy named Cardinal Pizzaballa, Italian, who is the Latin Patriarch of Jerusalem, who's been a very strong voice for Palestinians in the Holy Land. The other thing is his experience of that in going to Lebanon. One of the stories that's come out in the last couple of weeks is that he carries a photo in his wallet or on his person of a young boy who was there in Lebanon holding a welcome sign who then got killed by an Israeli airstrike. And apparently he's carrying that with him. So I think he is the Pope has to juggle a lot of competing factors, but in the same way that he's talking about the bombing in Iran, he's never saying this, oh, it was great for the Iranian regime to murder thousands of their people. He's never supporting the violence being done. He's looking towards how do we stop violence as it continues. You've suffered enough.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you for your attention today. And I'll share the PowerPoint with Pastor Craig. You can always reach out to me by email. Anna has my email, so and I'm happy to share it as well. So.
Hi, my name is David.
Hi, David.
I just wanted to make sure you knew about an op-ed introduced to you.
Oh,
it's a Mother's Day op-ed. Pope's mother.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, I did not see that yet. So.
Yeah.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Oh, look at that.
It's very interesting. I loved your opening joke.
Which one about the Episcopalian?
Yeah. I came to this community 20-some years ago from the Church of the East.
Oh, yeah.
And I'm gonna go with
I live
you.
right around there.
Yeah, in fact, I'm
Oh,
the
that's
guy
amazing.
dating.
That's
And Ryan's gonna go home and stuff.
Oh, he's
Talk
the one.
to you
He's
if
the
you-
one. Yeah, I saw a
Yeah.
coffee hour
Well,
a week back.
yeah.
Yeah. Good.
Anyway, I
Good.
really
Great to
appreciate
meet you.
your presentation.
Be well.
I want to say thank you, Carol Hurd. I have taught in 4 Catholic theology departments.
Oh, yeah.
So this was so nostalgic for me because I've taught in lots of different places, but most of my departmental dialogue has been with Catholics. I was the first non-Catholic in a tenure track position at the University of St. Thomas in St. Paul.
Yeah.
In 1988.
Oh, wonderful.
And I had like 8 wonderful years there. So I just want, and I was on the committee to commemorate Ram Navarre.
Okay.
We had a huge thing in 1991. But anyway, that was just absolutely brilliant analysis.
Do you ever do anything with my friend Cheryl Peterson? She's at Wartburg.
I know
She's
Cheryl.
an ecclesiologist.
We haven't collaborated a lot, but
Yeah.
I definitely know Cheryl from. There's the Lutheran Movement in Theology and Religious Studies informal organization that has a pre-meeting before AARSBL. So,
Oh, okay.
so that's how I know her. But anyway, that was just fantastic.
Good. I'm glad it was helpful. Good to meet you. Thank you. The welcome here has been so warm. So, yeah.
I was thinking that you probably are very comfortable at the service because it's so
Oh, it's very
Catholic.
Catholic. Yeah. I was like, I've never met High Church Anglicans, High Church Lutherans before. So, yeah, no, I will pray with anyone who wants to pray with me. So I'm one of those.
I have a question about the election of the Pope.
Yeah.
Do the people like the front runners? Do they know who they are? Is there like a speeches, anything like that?
Yeah. Here's the book you should look at.
I took a picture of the last slide.
This one here, Gerald O'Connell is Beta Paquet.
Okay.
That's the one. He's Irish, she's Argentinian.
Mm-hmm.
They do that book as a day-by-day diary of when Pope Francis dies, the meetings before the conclave, what they can know. I mean, it's officially you're excommunicated if you say anything that happens in the conclave. But they still talk, and so we get like the sense of like what happened. So there's speeches, there's jockeying, there's lots of meetings, there's some kin makers, there's some guys who are like are not going to be alive themselves but are trying to organize support for other people. There's some missteps. So one of the things, Caroline, who was the Secretary of State under Cardinal Caroline, who was the Secretary of State under Pope Francis, was thought to be a front runner, and then one of his buddies gave a speech about how bad it is that Pope Francis put women in charge of congregations, and everyone associated that with him, and his candidacy his started tanking at that point. So
interesting.
Yeah, it's still the Holy Spirit may be there, but she works through the politics of it all. It's very complicated politics.
It's really interesting because I'm a former Catholic, so I still love the popes and their dynamics, and I love this guy. He's great.
Did you watch Conclave?
I did not.
All right, watch that before you read the book. Watch that.
Okay.
I mean, it's got a Hollywood ending, and it's not entirely perfect, but it has some elements of this gives you a real sense of some of how the power politics play out in this room. I'm not going to spoil it. There's some things where dramatic stuff happenings. That's where it leaves the plausibility rails. But especially the first hour or so is really, I think, a good here's what it actually feels like, and it's visually beautiful. It's a beautiful film. So.
Okay, cool.
Yeah,
well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thanks for coming.
Oh, it's good to be here. Yeah.
It's fantastic.
I'm heading out back to DC for the summer tomorrow. Let's work out just right.
Well, safe travels.
Thank you.
Enjoy your summer. Where am I going?
I don't know.
Which way you need to go?
I don't know either. But I'm gonna figure out what Anna's up to.
I think she's down all the way that way.
Hey you. Don't worry about all that.
I was cleaning up my stuff.
Oh, okay. I thought you were.
Sorry about the time. I thought we were going to 11:45.
We were great.
Okay.
Pastor Craig sometimes goes to 10:30 and sometimes to 10:45.
Ah, okay.
And I just was doing
Make
that
sure.
to check.
Oh, good, good,
And
good, good.
no, it was awesome.
That's fun.
You did
Good
not go
group.
over time at all. You might want to end the meeting.
Yeah. I started to do